Tim Weinberg is the author of the book Phobia is the Way of the Worrier. Tim is with us now. Tim.
Hi, good evening.
I'm terrified of these things, Tim. And it's not funny.
Well, it's not funny. Everyone seems to be terrified of something. It's very, very personal to them.
So, can you explain how a phobia works?
Well, there could be many origins for them. It could go back to a childhood experience. It could be anecdotal, a fear that's passed down through families, maybe like the fear of operations. Anything to do with blood is obviously very, it's visceral. People respond to it, and kids hearing stuff like that, they pick up fears from their folks, from what's gone before,
But it's not rational, is it, that you've got a tiny little creature like a mouse, you've got a 20-stone man like me, and I literally run from these things. I'm literally to take a heart attack about these things.
Well, that's as you say, it's not rational. That's what a phobia is by definition. It's an irrational fear. Excuse me, I'm choking. It's an irrational fear. So you being able to talk about it after the event, in no way that conscious rationality doesn't come into it when you're confronted with the object of your fear.
Although it is logical, surely. These are dirty things, and these things can bite, and these things, as the listeners have been taking great pleasure in telling me, can crawl over your face with their little crawled feet at the middle of the night. They can crawl up your leg and bite whatever in the middle of the night.
Sure.
It's possible.
It is possible, and we're talking about an area of phobia where there seems to be, a real precedent for it. There's a reason why people don't like perhaps snakes or spiders or mice or whatever. What interests me is when you get into the sort of abstract realms of people being scared of a particular number or an object such as a button and having exactly the same response as you do when confronted with a live animal. They get anxious and they will want to run away from it, and it's something which to you probably seems even more trivial.
What about these other phobias that people have? There's a phobia of darkness, isn't there?
There is indeed. Again, you could argue these...
What's that, aclophobia or something?
No, you're correct. You've done your homework. You could argue that, again, these elemental phobias were there for our survival in days gone by. The fear of storms or high places, or... if it's environmental, it might have helped the species actually, get further. It's now we've reached a point where, through media saturation, someone who thought they had a phobia and were just a one-off finds there's someone across the world who shares the same phobia, and they kind of bond over it almost, And so for that reason, you could argue people aren't being cured of them. You could argue they're actually growing in number because people are exposed to more.
You see, Tim, I understand the phobia like the darkness, aclophobia, heights, altophobia,
exactly.
Flying, aviophobia. I understand those.
Yes.
But there's some I just don't understand that sound farcical to me. For example, there's a phobia of clowns.
Clowns? Well,
Coulrophobia.
Coulrophobia, indeed. Well, it's in fact the fear of clowns. It was the genesis of the whole book. And in fact, although this book is billed as kind of like psychology and self-help and stuff, really it was my interest in why people were scared of things rather than what they could do about it, which started it. And it was a piece I wrote for a magazine on clowns, and it was one of those things which the response was quite staggering. And again, there are different layers to it. You could say it's a childhood thing, a child at a party or at a circus is scared by them. But then you could say, you think of like Stephen King's novel It, where, Pennywise the clown is like sort of almost like the devil incarnate, he's a killer. And there are various it's a sort of chicken and the egg situation.
But why does it matter if someone has a phobia of clowns? They're never going to live with a clown. They're not going to come across a clown.
A phobia matters.
It's farcical.
It matters if it impinges on the day-to-day sort of freedoms and choices in life that you take for granted. Again, it is farcical, but I have seen people's reaction to clowns to like jump over walls and run away screaming. And if that is, yes, on a day-to-day level, you may not have to come into contact with clowns, but you could argue that's not a healthy fear to carry around with you if you're going to react in that way.
What about, and correct me, Tim, if I get any of these wrong, I'm sure I'll get the majority of them wrong, the fear of beautiful women, venustrophobia.
Yes. As in
is it venustrophobia?
Venustrophobia, yeah. Most of phobias have a kind of a Latin prefix and a Greek suffix. They're a sort of mixture of both traditions.
And that exists, a fear of beautiful women?
You might find it hard to reconcile with your own taste, but yeah, I guess so. I don't know. It makes people, I don't know, intimidated, insecure. Who knows? You know, there's a lot of men who probably do feel that way. I'm in an uncharted territory here. I'm going to try not to come across with some sort of cod psychology on the matter. I don't know.
Well, could you even start to attempt? I don't know how to pronounce the next one. Phobia, the fear of chopsticks.
The fear of chopsticks. Well, maybe someone, you know, again.
You see, if I was sitting at home listening to this, I would be saying, utter nonsense. The fear of chopsticks. And I'd be saying, what 5 Live lunatic is currently sitting at 1:45 in the morning talking about the fear of chopsticks? And I'd be texting in, talking about paying a licence fee. Listen to this cake.
The fact is, within the book, you know, there's about 1,000 phobias listed, and I don't even think chopsticks are that irrational. They make a clicking sound, they're pointed, you could get poked in the eyes with them. Maybe someone didn't enjoy a Chinese meal, got food poisoning. No respect to any Chinese listeners, I love Chinese food. There can be a whole series of reasons and images and symbols within a simple object which can resonate at different levels. It could be, as a kid, they saw a Fu Manchu movie at the same time a firework went off, and I don't know, they make connections. We make connections in our subconscious and unconscious minds which we're not really aware of. One of the girls I interviewed who was scared of buttons was because she'd been next to a jar of buttons which had smashed on the floor where she'd been sleeping. So it was the sound, it was the glass, you know, and that tied then into the button as the object being the cause of it. It's you'd have to be a far, far deeper person than myself to start unravelling all the threads that actually make up some of these phobias.
No, what we've done for the majority of this interview, just finally, Tim, is we've discussed the phobia, but you haven't told me how to get rid of these phobia yet.
Good point. And as I say, the actual sort of self-help aspect of the book was probably the last to fall into place. I was interested in where sort of fears come from, and to a certain degree, just the sound of words. You know, I'm a bit of a countdown geek and all that. And it was while I was researching the book that a sort of friend of a friend put me in contact with a guy training to be a hypnotherapist. And so he got his kind of flying hours in by testing out his new sort of techniques on me, of which I was oblivious to most of, because you are oblivious when you're sort of hypnotized. And my personal fear was acrophobia, better known as vertigo, the fear of heights. And I couldn't even walk up an open staircase. You know, it's certainly not a step ladder. Anything like that would have been out of the question. And this summer I was wandering around sort of mountains and foothills in the south of France, you know, in sort of open gorges and chasms and stuff. I'm not saying it would work for everyone. I'm just saying my experience of it was very positive. That's all.
Tim, lovely to talk to you tonight. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you. Night, night to you.